goes from color to black and white. I can see the mask over here. The mask is showing up as black. If you actually press the bracket, the backslash that is next to your parentheses. So you have the P and then you have the left and right bracket and then you have your backslash on your keyboard. If you actually press this backslash, what you can actually do is you can see where you've masked. And if you actually click in here, you can change the color. So in this particular case, I might want a blue color to be able to show me where my mask is because my flowers are red. So I can actually then go in here and I can see, have I missed any spots? And indeed I have missed a spot. So this is another way of being able to double check your work. If you're going to be editing in Photoshop, you want to do it in such a way that people really can't see where you have been editing. So I can see some areas in here where I need to use the white brush and go in a little bit more, so I can constantly kind of check this and see, do I have kind of any little holidays that are sticking around that I don't want to be around. So again, that backslash will give you the ability to see this. You can change the color of the backslash of the mask so that you can see it a little bit better. Depending on the picture that you have, certain colors might actually show up better. This would be really important if you're doing something like sharpening or if you're blurring something. You don't want, if you're blurring the background here and you missed a whole spot, that could be a very bad scenario here. Now once you have this mask, you can now apply it to other things. So say I just wanted to go to my levels, and we'll talk about levels in a different video, but in levels basically you can darken or brighten a picture. So say I wanted to darken a picture, but I didn't want to darken the entire picture, I can actually copy the mask from one layer to another. So what I do is I can press Alt and I can copy this layer and grab it and drag it from here to here and actually replace the mask so that the picture is being darkened except for the flowers. This can be very effective. Oftentimes you want your subject to be a little bit brighter and you actually want your background to be a little bit darker. So a lot of people actually apply a little bit of a vignette. And one of the ways, there's lots of ways to do a vignette, but one of the ways would be to actually darken using levels and then use a mask and just paint on the areas that you want to appear darker or lighter. So these masks are very effective. The masks that I'm talking about now are masks that are on adjustment layers. So all of these adjustment layers come with their own mask. So there's a mask for levels, a mask for white and black, a mask for color balance, etc. So all of these come with their own levels. Their own masks, excuse me. Again, these masks and these adjustment layers have no data, so it's basically just applying a mathematical formula to what's underneath. Similarly to if you put a piece of glass in front of your picture, if you used frosted glass, rippled glass, clear glass, non-glare glass, it would kind of affect the picture that's underneath. The glass has no pixels, but yet the glass does affect what's underneath. So that's one of the analogies you can use for thinking about adjustment layers, is that it affects what's underneath even though it doesn't have any data in it of itself related to pixels. But you can actually apply a mask to a layer that has pixels. So if you had two different layers here, one with somebody's eyes open and one with somebody's eyes closed, you could do the same thing. So in this case, I could actually make a duplicate layer. So I right-clicked on my background layer, made a duplicate layer, and we could actually name this if we were doing cloning or if we were doing eyes, if this was a person. You could name it whatever you wanted to name it. And then you could actually go down here to your mask and you could apply a mask here. And again, you could then make changes to just one of the layers here. So if I wanted to go in here and clone, again, just pretend this is, somebody's eyes or something, and I wanted to actually make an image where I had somebody's something that I wanted to appear on this layer, what I could then do is this layer is on and off, or I could mask this. So I could go in there and tweak. I could make sure I was on my brush tool, make sure that I was on black because I want to be now concealing part of the image, and I could actually then mask out just parts. So if you wanted just the eyes to appear, you could actually then tweak this. And if you look at this particular layer here, you can see that this is actually masking out this and it's revealing what is actually underneath. So there are various ways to use masks. If I was going to sharpen on this layer, so I'll put this in the trash, if I was actually going to make a duplicate layer, and I'll call it the unsharp mask, I could actually go up to my filter, go to sharpen, go to my unsharp mask, I could now apply the sharpening just to part of an image. Perhaps I don't want the deck to be sharp at all. So I could actually decide on how I want my sharpening. And there's basically two theories for how to sharpen. One is kind of using a large amount and a very small radius. And one is the opposite, using a very small amount and using a very large radius. I tend to go in the camp of doing a small amount, a large amount and a small radius. So I tend to be in that 0.9 to 0.5 to 1.5. 0.9 seems to work very well. You want to center your image, if this is a person or an animal, on the eyes. Whatever your center of interest is should be what you're looking to determine if it is indeed sharp or not. The threshold is something that basically I don't apply very often. The main time that I use threshold is if my image has a lot of sky or a lot of skin. Let's say it was a headshot just of a person and the only thing in the picture is their head. You don't want to sharpen somebody's skin. Nobody wants to see all their pores sharpened. You don't want to sharpen the sky. You don't want to see all the detail in the sky. So you could actually use the threshold. And the threshold basically tells it to delineate between the light and the dark and determine what it is you want to be sharpened. But for almost all my images, I leave the threshold at 1, unless, like I said, I have a lot of area of sky, a lot of area of skin, something like that. So now I've sharpened the whole picture, and I can actually, if I zoom in here, I can actually see the effect. So I turn the eyeball on and off, I can see the pistils and stamen, I can see everything get sharper as I click this layer on and off. So by clicking this, I can see the details appear. You don't want to sharpen an image too much. Some images are actually over sharpened, and that can be problematic as well. But let's say that you only wanted to sharpen part of an image. What you could actually do is you could put a mask on here. Now you could create a white mask and paint with black, or you could press the Alt key. You could actually create a black mask. So now in this case, the entire USM, that unsharp mask, is being hidden. And when it's hidden, you now have to be able to use the white brush. So I'm going to grab my paintbrush here. I'm going to make sure that I'm on white. And if you don't see any effect, then you can just start to switch. It's very, very forgiving. If you start to color outside the line, just switch to the opposite color. So in this case, let's say I want to sharpen just this particular area of the flowers, and I only want to be able to do this. You can see the white starting to appear where I've sharpened. So I can pick certain areas that I want to appear sharp. I don't have to sharpen the entire image. So now when I click this on and off, I basically have just certain areas where the sharpening has been applied to. I have sharpened, in this case, the pistils and stamens, the roses. I've sharpened just part of an image. This can be very effective if you have a child. I do this a lot for newborns. The only thing I sharpen are the eyes. The rest of the baby, you want to be, clear, smooth skin, and you want it to be very, very soft looking, and you want the eyes to really pop out at you. Be similar for an animal, fur, feathers, perhaps landscape. Perhaps you want to just emphasize just one particular part of your landscape, and you're just going to sharpen that part because that's the center of interest in here. So the mask, what I suggest everybody does is start by practicing just by doing this black and white layer. So you go to your background, you go to your black and white, you apply your mask to this, and then you start painting. So you just grab that brush. You're going to be at 100% opacity. When you first start using masking, I suggest you be at 100% opacity. Later on, you can start fooling around with the opacity and painting with 50%, which can be kind of fun as well. But one of the other things that you can do is, since you're working on layers, you can at any time change the opacity of any of these layers. So I can just reduce the opacity and perhaps bring in something that has a little bit of color. So rather than the full-blown color that was in here, you can kind of create that hand-painted look just by adding a little bit of color, or perhaps subduing it a little. Sometimes when you're doing editing, perhaps you've gone a little too far. Perhaps you've made somebody's skin a little too smooth, or something a little too sharp, or something a little too dark. This opacity is very, very useful for being able to tweak your image just slightly. So if I went down to my levels here and say I thought that was a little too dark, I could go into my levels at any point and change it, or I could just reduce the opacity slightly on here. And again, once you close Photoshop, all of these are going to remain exactly as they are. You can go back in at any time and you can tweak these back to, where they were beforehand. Any of these layers can be put in the trash can. Any of the eyeballs can be taken on or off. And you can go to your history palette and you can see exactly what I've done. I've deleted a layer, I changed my opacity, I had my black and white layer, I had my brush, I sharpened the picture. So you can actually go back in time, and I could go back and say, ooh, I over sharpened it, and I could actually go back in time and look at the image earlier. You can also take a picture at any point in time. So if I wasn't sure that I wanted to proceed with this particular line of editing, I could actually go down to the camera over here. I could take a picture, and basically this is my image when I first opened it up, and this is when I took the picture, and then I could say, okay, what did it end up with here? And I could actually then compare my original image. I could compare the image that I created and then the final image and decide what it is that I like the best. The history palette does disappear when you close Photoshop. So the layers will remain. The history is only available when you actually are editing on your image. As soon as you close that image, the history does disappear. I assume in a future version of Photoshop, these little snapshots will probably be available to you. But right now, the history is something only as you're working. That's another thing to bring up, is that you can step back